So welcome to our second reflection on forgiveness. We're going to be thinking about how we can forgive ourselves. So just invite you to take a moment to focus your attention and be still. I think it would be true to say that we all need strength on this journey of learning how to forgive ourselves. And the strength really comes from what I shared on our last reflection. Our strength comes from the truth that God has forgiven us. And therefore, we must learn to forgive ourselves in order to be free. Some years ago, I received a telephone call from a lady asking me if I remembered Uncle Lol. Lol Lovelady was one of my mum's large social group that existed before and during the Second World War. He married Edith, who was my Auntie May's best friend, Auntie May had died of TB during the war, and Uncle Lol and Auntie Edith were the only people from that group that my mum kept in touch with. This lady told me that Lol's brother was her father, and now in his 90s, he was very sick, and he wanted to see me. Now, I'd never met this man, and until this moment hadn't really thought that he existed. I made my way to the hospital, and I found him in his bed, surrounded by his family. When I arrived, his family left me with him for a short time, and he stretched out his hand, and he began to cry. He told me how fond he had been of May, and he said that when she developed a cough that he thought might be the forerunner of TB, he was too afraid to tell her. She was a very spirited, strong, brave woman. He suggested to her that she might like to go to the doctor, but May, being May, said, "It will pass," and she laughed at him. For over 60 years, that man had carried the burden of not having been assertive enough. He blamed himself for Auntie May's death and had never forgiven himself for not insisting that she go to the doctor. And now, as he drew near the end of his own life, he wanted to tell someone how he felt. Someone from May's family who could tell him it was all right. He died a few weeks later. And I hope that he was a little bit more at peace because of our encounter. I hope that he was able to forgive himself. I think it's worthwhile spending some time reflecting on the need to forgive ourselves. There are so many people that I meet who seem unable to forgive themselves for the things that have happened in their lives. They constantly berate themselves for what they did or didn't do to their parents or to their partners or their friends. They blame themselves for what other people have done to them. Some of us blame ourselves for things that have got nothing to do with us. We take on responsibility that isn't ours. I know as a child, I was convinced that my dad's state of mind and the things he did were because I wasn't a good enough son. Children of divorced parents sometimes blame themselves for the split up. Over the years that I've been involved in the area of spirituality, I've often heard the cry, how do I forgive myself? How do I learn to let go? In the Gospels, when Jesus forgives, it's an act of loyalty to the truth. Forgiveness is loyalty to the truth of who the other person is. To truly forgive someone is to both recognize and affirm who they are, beloved children of God, and to know that their true selves will only be brought out by affirmation and acceptance. In the act of forgiveness, God gives us back our dignity and self-worth. God affirms that we are good people who have messed up. We are not bad. When God looks at us, God sees a beloved son or daughter, not the mess we've made of our lives. Forgiveness is a way of loving. And the important reality is the healing and transforming effect that it has on the other person. Now, if that's true for the other, then it must also be true in the process of forgiving ourselves. So just take a moment, maybe pause the recording and ask yourself the question, can I give back to myself my dignity? Can I recognize that I am a good person who has messed up? Can I be true to myself? You know, much of the process of forgiveness is to do with learning how to love yourself despite the mistakes we make and the things that we do that we know are wrong. If it's about seeing ourselves as wonderful creations of God, then we have to begin to believe that we are not completely defined by our mistakes or the ways in which we have hurt other people. We all fail in loving and caring. But again, you know, like our mistakes, we are more than our failures. We are children of God. That is the more that we are. Freedom from the guilt and anxiety that comes with a lack of self-forgiveness depends on whether or not we're willing to believe that truth. In believing that truth, despite our mistakes, we can live in this world with our heads held high because of who we are. When people come to me for spiritual accompaniment, one of the exercises I try and encourage people to undertake is to stand in front of a mirror and to look at the reflection they see. And I invite the person to tell themselves that they are wonderful creations of God. It's amazing how few people can look in a mirror and tell themselves that truth. Sometimes people are so filled with self-loathing that they can hardly bear to look. But if we can persevere, then slowly for many people, their attitude to themselves begins to change. It's an act of loyalty to the truth. We are more than our mistakes. And we can regret what we have done without loading ourselves with guilt and recriminations. I often quote Ronald Rolheiser, the Canadian oblate. As well as the many books that he's written, he also sends out a weekly reflection. And in one of them recently, he said this: in the resurrection, we are assured that there are no doors that are eternally closed. Every time we close a door or one is closed on us, God opens another for us. The resurrection assures us that God never gives up on us, even if we give up on ourselves, that God writes straight with the crooked lines of our lives, that we can forever re-virginize, regain lost innocence, become post-sophisticated and move beyond bitterness. In a scheme of things where Jesus breathes out forgiveness on those who betray him and God raises dead bodies from the dead, we can begin to believe that in the end, all will be well, and every manner of being will be well, and everything, including our own lives, will eventually end sunny side up. However, the challenge of living this out is not just that of believing that Jesus rose physically from the grave, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, to believe that no matter our age, mistakes, betrayals, wounds, and deaths, we can begin each day afresh, virgin, innocent again, a child, a moral infant stunned at the newness of it all. No matter what we've done, our future is forever pregnant with wonderful new possibility. Resurrection is not just a question of one day after death rising from the dead, but it is also about daily rising from the many mini graves within which we so often find ourselves. Falling into a pit of despair when we make a mistake is common. We all do it, but we don't have to stay in that place, dragging ourselves through life, ashamed of ourselves and ashamed of what we've done. Henri Lecordier said this: We spend more time worrying than mending, more time toying with things we cannot change than the things we can. The resurrection of Jesus is the reminder to us that anything and everything can be redeemed, even the mess we condemn ourselves for, even the mess we refuse to forgive ourselves for. Nothing is beyond the scope of mercy. Many years ago, I was reading the story of Lazarus from John's Gospel, and a friend of mine asked me, "What tombs have you placed yourself in?" I think it was then that I realized we've all placed ourselves in tombs of bitterness and anger and frustration, tombs of false images of God and ourselves, tombs made up of those things in our lives that have hurt us and make us shy away from people, never willing to trust or be open, even with God. We've all placed ourselves in tombs made up of our lack of forgiveness of ourselves and others, desperate for freedom, and yet finding that it eludes us. We so need the power of reconciling love in our lives. And that's why we find Jesus in the story of Lazarus praying for life outside the tomb, culminating in that great cry, which I often think, must have shaken the very bowels of hell. Lazarus, here, come out. It's a cry for all who are held captive within to walk freely out of the tomb. Sometimes those tombs are secure and comfortable, but transformation never happens without a bit of effort on our part. It never happens without the willingness to walk out into the light in response to the call. Lazarus had to walk out of the tomb, and we have to do the same. And in the light, become what we can become. When Lazarus comes out of the tomb, he's given back to the community who are told, unbind him, let him go free. Healing is a process. We need support and encouragement to walk the journey of self-forgiveness. We need one another, and yet often we're so afraid to really share our lives with one another. We think we can do it alone in our own strength, and it is impossible. But the good news is that we are more than our messes. Just take a moment to realize that. And again, if you want to pause the recording and call to mind things that you haven't forgiven yourself for and bring them to the Lord, then take a moment to do just that. I know how difficult it is to let the walls of unforgiveness come tumbling down, particularly how to forgive yourself. I know how hard it is to walk free from the past. I know how hard it is to trust that God is the God who brings life and light into the depths and the darkness. But what other hope have we? One of the stories in the scriptures that I love very much is the story of the woman of Samaria in John's Gospel. I was once on the Mount of Beatitudes, and I found the statue that you see a picture of in front of you. It's carved out of a whole piece of olive wood. And I brought it back to remind me constantly of the power of forgiveness and the power of letting go, the power of forgiving yourself. So let's look at the story for a moment. The woman has come to draw water at a well in the middle of the day. She's come at the wrong time to avoid the other women. She was obviously aware of what others thought about her. And I guess she must have been consumed by anxiety and guilt and fear. Now, in this story, Jesus does what he often does, and he breaks all the rules. A Jew walking through Samaritan land stops to talk to a woman. Jews did not walk through Samaria. Jews did not talk to women in public. So it's little wonder really that she's surprised when Jesus speaks to her. Note how he immediately allows himself to need her. Give me a drink, he says. You help me. You serve me. Despite her reputation and what she thinks about herself, Jesus is calling her to a new place. You know, God has somehow allowed God's self to need us, to need our love, our service, so that we can be free and find our true selves, not live weighed down with guilt and fear for the things we've done wrong. God has faith in us. When Jesus looks at this woman, he sees possibility in her. When Jesus looks at us, he sees possibility in us. We don't have to be weighed down with guilt and fear. The conversation between them goes on, but Jesus moves it to a different level when he invites the woman to reflect on the relationship that God is offering: love and life, giving and receiving, freedom and peace. And this woman moves from a place of unbelief and shallowness and lack of forgiveness of herself as Jesus leads her more fully to the truth of who she is in God. She begins to recognize that with all the mess in her life and all the mistakes that she's made, she is loved and forgiven. And her experience of an encounter with a Jew changed her life. She began to believe in herself. And her belief in herself and the transformation that took place within her touched the lives of others, who then grew in relationship with him and who knew the truth of who Jesus is, but also of who they were in the sight of God. This woman, like Nicodemus earlier in John's Gospel, is being challenged to let go and to allow love to flow through her. I think the difference between the two of them is that this woman has nothing to protect. She doesn't have any reputation. She doesn't have any standing in society. She can, if she chooses, trust Jesus. She can, if she chooses, forgive herself and move on from the past. There is another little phrase in the story of the Samaritan woman that I think is worth dwelling on for a moment. The woman goes back to her village and she tells the people, "Come and meet a man who told me everything I ever did." I used to think of that in terms of negativity, that he told her all the bad things that she did. But a woman I know who spends a lot of time reflecting on the scriptures reminded me of the truth. He told her everything she did, all the good things as well as the bad things. He affirmed who she is in the sight of God. Within us all, there is a mix of good and bad. And honesty about ourselves is the only way to growth. The Lord tells us who we are, affirms who we are. And maybe one of the lessons about this passage, this story of the woman of Samaria, is that we have to be honest about ourselves, but we also have to be willing to let go and to move on. Maybe we're being invited to see the good things in our lives as well as the bad. Perhaps we can learn the lesson that with all the pain and the mess that goes on in our journey, we are still loved. We are forgiven by God. So who are we to condemn ourselves? If I had a pound for the number of times I've had people say, "I can't forgive myself," I'd be a millionaire. Don't waste life caught up in recriminations from the past. Bravely face yourself. Let go of what you have to let go of and find the courage to walk into the light. So how do we enter into this process of learning to love and forgive ourselves? I think it's by having the courage to bring to God our fear and guilt about the things that we've done. I think it's about asking God for that great gift of freedom. The power of the gospel of Christ is that we don't have to live life weighed down by guilt. Now, it might take some while to be free, but that's the desire of God's heart for us. That's what the story of Lazarus and the woman of Samaria invite us to reflect on. Life really is too short to live with recriminations and blame of ourselves or of others. To forgive yourself is to let go of what cripples and disfigures you within. So have courage. Come before God in order to be freed from guilt and shame. Come before God to find love that will enable you to forgive yourself. You know, whenever we pray, the first person we meet is always ourselves. And I think that's why so many people give up. We can't cope with our guilt, our sorrow, our pain. So we avoid having to face it. But you know, God is generous and God always meets our need in the way that we can best cope with it. So let God free you. Let God free you from your guilt, your shame, your inability to forgive yourself, and you will find life, extraordinary, abundant, generous life. It's not an easy journey to forgive yourself, but it is the only way to find peace. And when we find the inner strength to forgive ourselves, we will find the same strength to enable us to forgive others. So have courage. Enter into the process. Let go of what you hold on to and find new life.
Prepare my mind, prepare my soul, prepare my heart and make me whole. Prepare me for the awesomeness of you. Renew me, a spirit strong. Remind me, Lord, of all that's wrong. Create in me complete desire for you. And make me holy, Lord. Make me holy, Lord. Make me holy, Lord, like you. Consume my mind, consume my soul, consume my heart and make me whole. Consume me with the awesomeness of you. Destroy the pride, destroy the hate, destroy the things that separate, and keep me from returning back to you. Make me holy, Lord. Make me holy, Lord. Make me holy,
So thank you for listening, and thank you to my friends from CJM Music who've allowed us to use a couple of their songs just to help us in the process of reflection. Thank you.